Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe that.
Good time of day once again. This is episode 155 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle. He doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. I'm Benjamin Castle, and sitting not too far from me is Brian Harambe, my nephew.
My son.
That's my son! That's my boy!
All right, round two. Once again, not a super narrative heavy round. Not a round that had too many, down to the wire games, but some interesting ones.
I mean, even the ones with the close margins weren't necessarily down to the wire. They just kind of...
No, but they were competitive.
Yeah, I mean, really, we had that at the start of the week. I want to say right off the bat, though, I want to dedicate this episode to the Cincinnati Bearcats Aussie Rules team, the first fully collegiate Australian rules football team in the United States. They are playing their inaugural match this coming Saturday against the Cincinnati Dockers of the USAFL. Our dream of NCAA Aussie rules is alive.
They're going to have to make a lot of changes to Nippert Stadium for this to really work.
I mean, Nippert's an old venue. I mean, it's just get rid of it and get something better and bigger. And Brian rolls around on the carpet and aggressively cleans himself now. I think we're going to jump right from that, talking about one team in America that wears red, white, and black, to another getting a cathartic home victory, that being the Saints, in an actual home game at the G. Second year in a row that they have won a home game at the G. St Kilda 14-10-94 defeated Collingwood 12-7-79. Eric Bana was there, of course. Attendance of 69,517, their highest ever home attendance for a regular season game at the G.
Kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah, nice enough. And who else was there? A former Formula One racer, I believe?
Yeah, I mean, Formula One was in town, so makes sense.
Yeah, Mark Webber. And speaking of Formula One, interesting things happen when Verstappen has mechanical problems.
Yeah, someone else wins a race for once.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz, I believe. I know some people were not happy that McLaren didn't try to get Piastri into P3 instead of his teammate.
Nazaya Wanganeen Miller had a really nice game. 32 disposals, played a lot along the outside, really showed off the speed. Kind of was just everywhere. Rowan Marshall totally outclassed Collingwood in the middle. Here's the funny thing about his game. He only had 13 hitouts, and St. Kilda lost hitouts 47-13. He also had 11 clearances. Weird strategy, but it worked.
Yeah, maybe it didn't go up for them as much. He didn't try to just totally outbody Darcy Cameron or Mason Cox, but he's strong enough on the ground and in other aspects of his game that he could just be used almost just as an extra tall mid in there. And my affinity for tall midfielders is probably becoming well known to our regular listeners at this point. I'm hoping that Hawthorn can really take from that. We'll have plenty of things to say about the Hawks. But yeah, definitely more on the Saints at this time. I thought the real focus was going to be Jack Sinclair winning on the outside, and he certainly did, but not nearly as noticeable as just the dominance from the back that Nazai had in terms of kind of quarterbacking some of their movement and just very much being in charge there. I mean, yes, you have Callum Wilkie hanging back there, but he's more of the one-on-one, and you've got Nazaya as the looser, usually kind of coming over as an extra, and in a way that kind of reminds me of kind of how Nick Vlostone can command a back unit.
You know who I actually really liked was Josh Battle.
What's a battle?
24 disposals, 12 intercepts, 7 marks, just a lot of fluid movement from the defensive 50 that launched a lot of their attacks. I thought this was one of the best games I've seen him play, if not the single best. He was really good.
Yeah, just overall, the Saints back line was very strong. Battle, oftentimes that second-rate 1v1, and has had some pinch hit time in the ruck in the past. That not needed as much now with Max King healthy again. and a strong 3 straight showing from him as well. Collingwood got forward a decent amount. I mean, as shown by the Saints being +9 on tackles inside 50.
I mean, that doesn't so much show that.
I mean, it was definitely kind of an effect of that. At least Collingwood definitely had the forward time and were decent in terms of conversion, but a lot of chances were cut off by interceptors like Battle and Wanganeen Miller. I was very pleased with both of them. And Ryan Burns kept up from last week as well. Kind of just an extra piece often, kind of going from defense to the midfield. Never somebody who's going to get a lot of focus, but he was the best player on the ground that happened to be playing in their 50th game.
Yeah, it was also 50 for Nick Dacos, and he kind of struggled.
He's human.
Burns has just been quietly decent through these first couple games. I will give Collingwood fans this. The umpiring was not on their side. It was not why they lost this game, and I think most Collingwood fans, at least the ones that we follow, seem to accept that. But yeah, free kicks were 30-16, and there were some bad ones. I mean, my favorite play of the night, of course, was Jack Higgins. I guess it was kind of out of bounds. You know the one, but the fact is,
You can't even tell.
I mean, the ball was out of bounds. His left foot was still in.
Can't tell based on...
My belief is that because it looks cool and was close enough, it should count.
And he's also got the 1 goal of the year already from a play that shouldn't have really counted. From his time at Richmond when he just literally tossed up the ball before kicking it. So, you know what? Give him another goal of the year for a questionable play. Why not? And piss off more pies.
Let's talk about Collingwood, yeah? Oh, actually, before that, let's talk... Mason Wood had a pretty nasty injury.
Yeah, there was a concussion and broken collarbone. For somebody who had started off last year so hot, that's definitely disheartening. They're looking at a 6-week timeline there.
Yeah, so he had crashed into Zane Cordy, who mostly had a good game. Cordy had 1 or 2 mistakes, but was mostly good. Yeah, it was just friendly fire, guys going for the ball, an attempt to spoil. It happens.
What wasn't friendly fire was Max King, who elbowed Finn McRae in his head late on in the game. Now, the Saints are challenging that 1-game suspension, so long Tuesday night ahead for Mr. David Zita.
So let's talk about Collingwood.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about. They're very turnover prone on handballs in particular. There was just one sequence, it might have been deleted on Twitter, but Jack Crisp was just still struggling to start the year, not being able to get off passes efficiently in the midfield at all.
Darcy Moore had a couple of handballs to nobody that turned into goals the other way.
The defense structure looked better, I think, with Frampton in there? Question mark?
Frampton's such an interesting player. You know, he got a lot of shit for his 2 disposals, but when he's played up front, he's kind of been, just occupy the other team's best defender.
The neutralizer or the annoyance. I've talked about that on Twitter multiple times.
Interesting player.
But saying this guy could be that annoyance type player. We saw, for example, Robbie Fox in the first round, a defender going forward like that. So it didn't shock me that Frampton could end up playing that role well. I just think that just with that extra tall there, everything fell into place a bit more. Still a whole lot of questions and not much time to turn things around because another big Thursday coming up at the Gabba. Again, this is the first time ever that both grand finalists have started the season 0-2, and now Collingwood's already at 0-3 heading into Holy Thursday.
Is it time for a clickbaity thing about, is Lachie Schultz the worst player in the AFL? Fremantle are undefeated since Schultz left, but Collingwood's 0-3 with him.
Is Schultz the anti-glue?
Yeah, handball errors, miscommunication, weird things for Collingwood. Now, there are a couple of things just like structure-wise that I think you can look back and say, maybe they should have more of a real ruckman than Mason. Because, Darcy Cameron's kind of a ruck forward. There's only so much you can do about guys like Nathan Murphy and Dan McStay getting hurt. Do they miss Jack Ginnivan? I think with some of their lack of execution in the forward 50, you could definitely argue that.
Would be nice to have him be able to still pair with Pat Lipinski.
Pat Lipinski, by the way, got our vote for the polished turd, which, if you're not familiar with, the best player on the losing team in each game gets a vote.
Yeah, and Lipinski just kind of had maybe the most complete game out of anyone for Collingwood. Josh Dacos had the numbers in the ground game, as did Braden Maynard, but I would say, Lipinski was the one that I think was the cleanest out of them.
He was legitimately good.
I just don't know where the solution lies in the immediate for Collingwood.
I mean, don't handball to the other team. That's a good place to start.
I think there's got to be more just structurally they ought to be able to fix.
I think it's still too early to really press the panic button with their season, but between this and the schedule, it's not going to help their odds of a top 4 spot, that's for sure. And I do have to say, it's funny because they both had such good finals run last year, but people have talked a lot about Pendlebury and Sidebottom looking washed. Sidebottom more so. Is Tom Mitchell kind of wearing things out? It's worth at least contemplating.
In terms of the defense, I mean, we've already seen some of the immediate depth in Charlie Dean, and he, was decent but nothing special. Don't think Josh Eyre is ready for AFL time yet. And if you're looking at kind of movement out of the back, they could give Jacob Ryan another go. He's gone well enough to start. If you're talking about just kind of getting an actual ruckman in there, I guess it's a matter of when Josh Eyre or Oscar Steen could be ready, but they're coming up on this real kind of list gap here where they've got an aging group at the very top, a premiership group, and there's going to be a real gap in terms of skill, and they're not going to be able to breach that super easily. Sounds kind of like Geelong, but the thing is, Geelong's actually started all right this year, so are the Pies the ones that are too old and too slow?
Yes.
Look, the realistic, honest evaluation that I have is that everything went right. Every little thing went right during their run last year, and right now, they're not doing little things so well, and it's exposing other flaws that last year's run was able to mask. Like, they don't have that one big target in the forward 50, and even when they had McStay, there was no one guy that everything was really built around. Love Bobby Hill, Brody Majacek at times can be that guy, but a consistent score, but not like, it's not like they have a presence like a Max King or a Taylor Walker. And that's going to be something they'll really need to target soon enough. And again, that sort of gap and lack of depth is definitely being exposed this year as well. They've got, they had a good 26 in there, and they were lucky that they didn't need more than that for much of the year. Speaking of the team that isn't necessarily too old and too slow,
Adelaide 11-11-77 defeated by Geelong 14-12-96.
Tom Stewart blowing everybody away in his 150th game and was chaired off afterward. Fuck you, Kane Corns. I don't know if he even commented on it, but
I don't think he did, but I don't care what number games was. He was fantastic. He did get the 3 Golden Fist votes this week, which I said he had pretty much locked up before the other 6 games had been played in the round. Yeah, he was unbelievable. Just between directing play out of the back, roaming, the intercept marking, whether he's in a sweeping role or one-on-ones. You had said you were looking for Luke Pedlar to have a big game, and it turns out Pedlar's job was kind of to shadow Tom Stewart, and he just
did not work.
It didn't work at all.
The stat sheet showed well for Stewart: 28 disposals, 15 intercepts, 11 marks, including a record-tying 10 intercept marks. Don't you dare get 11. 6 score launches and 613 meters gained. My opinion on being chaired off, by the way, 200 is a big enough milestone where I think it makes sense from there and every 50 after. I think just Stewart earned it in this one.
Oh, he totally earned it.
Well, considering later start to the career, what he's done already in that time span, and then being the commanding player, this was one of his absolute best games. And the fact that he also did it against my pick for main character when I thought, oh yeah, he could be one to really body up against somebody like Stewart. I don't know, there's something gratifying in even being proven a bit wrong in this case. Just okay, yeah, Stewart is able to take care of players who try to body up against him. But it doesn't really bother him.
I am so fortunate that mostly because a guy had a cool name and cool hair, I ended up getting to watch one of the best defenders, currently the best defender in the sport in his prime. That other player, by the way, was Brian Myers, who was pretty much universally the second best player in this game behind Stewart. The coaches' votes seem to agree on that, which makes me quite happy.
How about a rare 3-goal showing from Brian? He hasn't done that much.
3 goals, 2 assists, 26 disposals, 12 score involvements.
In 100 8 career games. That is his, I guess, his 8th showing of 3 or more goals. Now, how many of those have come against North, I don't know. But this ain't a sandbagging North team. This is a team that people are expecting to be, or were expecting at the start of the year, to be in the finals conversation and have a host of problems. I still think the Crows are in a bit of a similar spot to last year. Yeah, they were 0-2 last year. The difference is, well, we were looking after that first game, it's like, man, they really pissed out one way against the Giants of all teams, and then, well, they nearly came back against Richmond, and it established that trend of them not being able to overcome bad kicking. That was the case in this game again, but it wasn't just in one quarter. It was a bunch of different times. And it's funny because as it turned out last year, you wouldn't have thought after round 2, oh no, the loss to the Giants isn't the bad one. It's the loss to Richmond that ages worse. But there were some. Taylor Walker had a close miss. The best one by far was Josh Worrell on the run. Yeah, that was not great.
I can't believe that happened.
And speaking of Tex, how about Jack Henry actually being the right guy to match up against him? Usually you'd expect it to be someone a bit bigger.
Like Sam DeConing. Well, here's the thing. Henry is not small. Wider, certainly. And DeConing just hasn't played all that well yet. He wasn't bad in this game, but he still wasn't 2022 form or anything close to it.
I just don't think of Henry as being able, as a defender who's usually able to go up against like that top guy. I mean, I guess he redeemed himself against Buddy in the 22 grand final.
Yeah. I mean, look, physically, he's totally up for the challenge. I don't know, especially without Asaba, I don't know who else you'd even consider there.
I guess with DeConing in poor form, it kind of does automatically fall to Henry because...
Unless you want to have Stewart do some of that, which you can definitely do.
I mean, you could have him do that, but then that takes away from his sweeping, and that was what was such a great thing about this game for him. So, I mean, you could take him on him at times, especially when Henry's off the oval, but I guess that's just kind of the hierarchy for the Cats at this point, and we ought to give Jack Henry credit for his one-on-one abilities.
Also, back to Stewart real quick. You can make the argument that Sam Taylor is a better one-on-one defender. You can make an argument that Callum Wilkie is a pretty good one-on-one defender, but the combination of one-on-one defending, sweeping ability, ball movement, the complete package, Tom Stewart is the best. And in like 5 years, I can think of maybe 3 or 4 down games he's had.
Multiple of which come against Frio.
Yep.
I don't know why that kryptonite is there, but I want to focus less on the defense at this point because that's kind of a given at this point with Stewart especially. Yeah, and more on the inside because coming into this game, there were a bunch of outs that were kind of late for the Cats. Well, we already knew that Tanner Brune would be nursing his foot injury this week, but Brandon Parfit and Mitch Nevitt as the sub came in quite late, and well, Nevitt came in very, very, very late into the game, like when it was pretty much over just to pick up the match check because Tom Atkins was a late out, and so was Mitch Duncan because his wife gave birth to their 4th child, PJ.
Yeah, so if you look through the injury list, so I found out probably about a little over 90 minutes before bounce about these two. It was Atkins, adductor, Duncan had sex 9 months ago.
Actually, that means that there were 2 players this round who missed games because of having sex 9 months ago. The other being Nick Haynes. And
oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And both their teams won. But with Atkins out, especially Atkins and Brune, that combination,
I was really worried just about being able to keep up physically.
You said right away, oh, this requires a big game from Brandon Parfit. And Parfit held up, but who also went into the inside that we kind of didn't expect to be as on ball as he was on the inside, but Dingle's own Mark O'Connor. I mean, we've seen him work on the inside before as a tagger, but not getting as much in terms of actual possession time as he did in this game. Only 15 disposals, but 12 contested and 8 tackles. So, I mean, it came naturally to him.
I thought he was huge.
Oh, he filled that gap incredibly well. At 11 contested possessions and an octopus for Parfit as well. I'm not sure if these are players that the umpires would recognize for their work in the guts, but without them, I could not have seen the Cats being anywhere in touch in this game, especially when you're dealing with people like Rory Laird and Matt Crouch in there, who are ball magnets in themselves.
I did not think Laird was very good. I thought Crouch was. Laird, I thought just, he got into contests, but didn't do a good job getting the ball out of them.
I mean, that
was kind of turnover prone.
that's Laird for you. He's a fantasy god, but in terms of like actual impact in terms of emerging from contests, yeah, I would say Crouch has been the better of that these first couple rounds as well. I mean, I was talking up Matt Crouch as maybe getting the polished turd from the first game against the Suns, but we ended up going with Joshua Shelley for his 3-goal effort. There was a strong argument, though, for Crouch.
Yeah, I thought Riley O'Brien was Adelaide's best in this game, and he gets the polished turd.
I think that's a pretty clear one. Outdid Reece Stanley in the rug. Mark Blitzov's had to come in a decent amount to help make up for that. And with Stanley potentially fading in that regard, I mean, Ned Reeves for Hawthorn hasn't had a great start to
No, and I think it's a proper body type matchup for Stanley, but I think beefier guys, I think you'd rather go with Toby Conway.
And I would rather just get Conway in for Easter Monday to begin with and manage Stanley. Have him in there maybe, or wait.
Hold up.
Actually, this is an interesting one because after Easter Monday, you've got the Bulldogs in the
Gather round.
and we know what Conway did against the Bulldogs the first time. So, do you let Stanley go against Reeves and then hopefully bring Conway in when you go south? Or do you try to get Conway 2 games in a row? If you are in charge of list management here, where do you go?
I think I'm giving Stanley this one because I think Reeves is a guy he can handle.
And who knows if it is Reeves or if I'd love to see him make a move to put Lloyd Meek back in over him.
I forget if it was Hawk Talk or who, but was saying, they'd probably give Reeves like another 2 or 3 games before making a move there. That's more preview talk, but within this game, I thought it kind of fit the 2022 model of win both 50s and do enough in the midfield. And considering the outs, that's really all you could ask for. And I think, Parfit did more than enough. O'Sheen Mullen did not have a great game, but it was also a tough role for him to fill. You take out Tom Atkins and bring in Mullen, who is not so much a physical player as he is, quick, good at creating space. Just, they toughed this one out.
And Parfit and O'Connor were big reasons why they toughed it out.
It's their first real road win since 2022 because their only out-of-state win last year was A, a neutral site game, and B, against a reserves-level opponent.
And that, of course, was West Coast in the
Gather round.
I had said if we could get 2 or 3 wins out of our 5 out-of-state games, not counting the
Gather round.
I'd be quite happy.
Well, there's one.
Yeah, that's one. And this was one that, at times, I did not expect to get. When we briefly gave up the lead in the third quarter, last year's team never recovers from that. It ends up being a run of 8 goals in a row. This year's team, instead, gets back-to-back goals within the space of a minute out of Tom Hawkins, one set up by Gryan, one set up by Patrick Dangerfield, and then got a little help later with, like I said, Fogarty drilling one into the post. That was really nice. But I don't care what the X score said. I think the right team won this game.
And I think most of the 44,758 in attendance would agree. By the way, not too many games where you get 4 Irishmen in there, but you had all 3 for Geelong, Toohey, O'Connor, and Mullen, as well as Mark Keane for Adelaide. I would love at some point for Geelong fans to just organize an Irish Heritage Night.
What would an all-Irish all-star team look like? It's been done, right?
I would imagine it's been
not just guys with Irish heritage like they've done with Italian and Greek, but actually from Ireland.
Well, I'm not sure if we have enough to make a team right now, but obviously if you're talking all-time, Jim Steins, Ty Kennelly.
Yeah, we're not talking all-time. I'm talking current.
I'm not sure if we have enough for even an 18 right now, unless we go to the very bottom of lists. Callum Brown, of course, being from Northern Ireland, would be in there. I'm not sure just if we get enough. There were a couple on the Lions list, I think, at least one, Jimmy Madden. And Derek Joyce as well. Hasn't gotten an AFL game in a while, and with the additional back depth that the Lions have now, especially as Tom Duday might play as early as Holy Thursday, then, it would be tough for him to get another game, but we need an Irish Heritage Night at some point. And I would, I don't know, it's a very, American idea, a cultural heritage night like that, but it would fit.
Before we move on, I want to throw back to the Saints game real quick because there was one thing that I totally forgot to mention, and I was debating between, do I mention it now? Do I mention it when we're going to or coming back from a break? One negative I have for how the Saints have played, and I think they've been pretty darn good so far. 1-1 against a couple of quality teams. They have had some bad telegraph kicks in their own 50 that have gotten intercepted and turned into goals, so that's something they need to clean up. I had meant to say that earlier. North Melbourne 11-10-76, defeated by Fremantle 15-12-102. North had an early 30-point lead and then just kind of ran out of gas.
Yeah, it's a very developing team sort of game there. Second half was 10-3 in Freo's favor, but I think there are a lot of encouraging signs out of this game from North. We saw a bit more of the selfless side of Nick Larkey in this one. Yes, he can be dominant in the air, but he made some really nice decisions onto like when not to go up for certain packs, when to just kind of occupy Alex Pierce and let somebody else take the mark. Paul Curtis is learning how to play directly off of a tall. Yes, I thought he did a really nice job of that. Like, if I'm looking at this compared to last week, I thought this was a far better game out of North, mostly because they were much more physical in the midfield. They weren't just kind of getting run through. Like, look, they're not very good defensively. Their actual defenders are not that good. Toby Pink had a couple of smothers, and that was cool. Aiden Core had like one decent play, but their back six are just not very good, and that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, they were up for the challenge. They got beat by a superior team, but I thought even though his numbers were great, just having Jai Simpkin in there seemed to get everyone else, especially Luke Davies-Uniacke, more willing to put up a good fight in the middle. Luke Davies-Uniacke and also Tom Powell, who had a career game, 2 goals off 28 disposals and 8 clearances. The combination of him and Davies-Uniacke together fueled North's play from the middle, getting a lot of possessions right away. Center clearances big time in the first half, and they just kind of ran out of steam in the second half. I put up a poll on Twitter asking, is it more the North failed to adjust or that they ran out of gas? And people seem to say it was the latter, that they just ran out of gas, and that makes enough sense to me. And they did. I want to give credit also to Tristan Cherry for a good start to the season. One, to hit out in clearance battle for a large part of things in terms of the ruckman. And it's interesting when you're talking about the debate with Luke Jackson being so dominant, and you still have kind of this gap in the clearances with Jackson as the main ruck. Maybe Darcy is better just like off the immediate ruck contest, but Jackson can do more on the follow-up, almost in a way that Rowan Marshall was so good at it on Thursday. Because what Jackson was able to create elsewhere on the oval as well was really notable. A couple goals, launched a number of scores, not just from his time in the ruck, but also a couple times even going back and taking some hangers there, including one of the Mark of the Week nominees. It reminds me a bit of his mentor from his first couple years in the AFL, Max Gawn, where this was one of those games where at times it felt like there were 2 or 3 Luke Jackson out there. Also, I thought Bailey Scott had a nice game for North. Yeah, I mean, Scott is always that kind of next guy up on the outside, isn't one to take a lot of time in the center square, but they did a good job involving him. Yeah, I consistently have liked Bailey Scott. I think he's somebody that kind of gets overlooked in comparison, especially when you've got kind of this younger crop coming up in Wardlaw, Sheasel, McKercher, and Dersma. I think just Scott might kind of get lost in the mix there. So I'm glad that we're mentioning him. I thought this was a weird game for Freo in a number of respects. I liked that they were able to win this game with, other than Jackson, a largely different cast of contributors from last week. I mean, Caleb Theron was good, but not, otherworldly. Not 46 disposal. Got good. But Jordan Clark was good. I have been singing Jordan Clark's praises since the second quarter of this game, so that's a good, 2+ days at this point. Clark wasn't attending center bounces, but he was as high up in the defensive 50 as he could be. Immediately after the bounce, came into the center square and was really important in a lot of overlaps, helped get a lot of their faster passages going, and took a few important intercepts as well, most notably in the second quarter to stymie North a bit before halftime and start turning the momentum back to the Dockers. I think this was one of Clark's structurally best and most important games, and I want to see him keep being used in that manner. Also, I was very critical at the start of seeing Bailey Banfield playing so much in defense at times, I guess kind of following plays back there. Some Freo fans were saying, that's just kind of necessary with Oscar McDonald and Brennan Cox being out among others. Well, Cox played forward firstly, but I said Bailey Banfield's not a defender after he had multiple mishaps in terms of turnovers and just misplays in the back half. And then what do you know, shortly after that, started a very good offensive series of plays from him where he ended up getting 2 goals and assists. Bailey Banfield is a forward. And also he and Tom Emmett can coexist in the forward line because I think Emmett is more of the pressure type and Banfield more of the finisher. That's important in terms of making up for Lachie Schultz in the aggregate. Also, I know his numbers for this game weren't anything remarkable, but I thought Alex Pierce was outstanding. When you're playing North, the biggest thing you have to do, other than obviously get on top of the numbers in the middle, is find a way to neutralize Nick Larkey. And by and large, Pierce did that after the first few minutes. In both games, he has been the dominant defensive presence in the defensive 50 for Frio. He's not the ball carrier out. That's obviously Luke Ryan. Yeah, although in this game, it was a little bit more of Clark than Ryan. It was a quieter game for Luke Ryan. He wasn't bad by any means. He just wasn't, like, last week, if it wasn't for Caleb Sarong having the game of his life, Luke Ryan is your 3 votes. But Pierce, in terms of, like, the actual pure defensive work, has kind of seemed to have found things again, found his 2022 form again. I still really don't know how to interpret Frio at this point in terms of, like, longer-term prospects, because, yes, the Brisbane win is impressive at home, though, and without Lachie Neal. This one, I mean, it should be a free hit against North, and the first half suggested no, it definitely wasn't. So I'm not sold on anything. We will know a lot more about them very quickly. Yeah, well, they've got the Crows this coming week for a Good Friday evening game after the afternoon clash with North and Carlton. Then during the
Gather round.
they have Carlton. Then they're at Port. I don't know if they're going to stay over in Adelaide or how that's going to work. They are. They are going to. Then they've got Western Derby, their away Western Derby, and then hosting the Bulldogs round 7. That was an interesting one last year. I mean that's the Anzac game, but we're going to be keeping a close watch on Frio, and I know you're really hyping up this game against the Crows this coming. I think it's the most interesting game out of this round in a lot of respects. Like, Orton Melbourne is a top tier game, and yes, the grand final rematch is a big deal, but I just think like the unpredictability, the combo of 2-0 Frio, which I don't think most people saw coming, and 0-2 Adelaide, which, I mean, if you had asked, I probably would have thought both these teams would have come in at 1-1. I think this is a really interesting situation. Hawthorn. Hold on. I'm going to do the thing again. There was one other St. Kilda thing I forgot to mention. Oh my gosh, is this going to be between every game now? I was thinking about that, but I think this is the last of them. I don't know how I didn't mention Liam Henry. So I had thought heading into this game, you know, that, all right, we're all Saints fans tonight. We're all going to realize why it's so depressing to be a Saints fan. And then they actually won, which I was not counting on. And then we find out Liam Henry pulled his hamstring. And it's 6 to 8 weeks, like not a minor hamstring. Yeah, and he had played really well. He would have been in the vote conversation as well, I think, in this one, but not playing the final 15-ish minutes doesn't help. Looking at the coaches' votes, he was not in there. We don't have really any, like, particularly interesting distributions of coaches' votes this week, except we would have had a perfect game if Adam Simpson and Adam Kingsley had agreed on one vote, because they agreed on the 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now, Hawthorn 5-8-38, defeated by Melbourne 14-9-93. I did not expect the Hawks to give us the lowest score of the round. That's the first thing. Now, I think the defensive setup for Melbourne was excellent, and just how quickly they got numbers into the back half and cut off any and all reasonable options in the corridor, forcing things to go down the line, taking out the usability of those bigger body midfielders and the strong runners like Jai Newcomb, minimal impact for the dynamic half forwards like Dylan Moore and Jack Ginnivan. And Hawthorn just didn't seem to find a way to really work through that, because they were also trying to figure out how to keep things short, stay away from Stephen May and Jake Lieber. More on both of them in a second. So I think Hawthorn's initial game plan ended up facilitating Melbourne's even more so. And it made for just a very, very frustrating day for Hawks fans at the G. At least Max Lynch is now their game day MC. Is that going to be an all-the-time thing? Sounds like it. He'll be emceeing all their home games this year at least. So maximum lunch for all. Cool. He seems like a really fun guy, so I am very much in favor of that. That's cool. Here's my thing. You know, normally I have a lot of positive things to say about Hawthorn. Yeah, we've talked about the, like, hey, fuck you, but I like what you're doing.
I really enjoy the way they are rebuilding. I like their direction as a club. I like Sam Mitchell's coaching. This is one of the few games where I did not like that. I thought his game plan here, I mean, what even was the game plan other than like,
well, keep things short to stay away from the all-Australian defensive duo, but also they didn't have the pace for it. I think maybe just kind of got spooked by how Melbourne was setting up like right past the halfway point. I think Simon Goodwin and his staff anticipated Hawthorn's style quite well in this game. I just, looking at this matchup, like other than maybe stat padding with uncontested possessions and marks for their defense, Thank you, James Sicily.
I don't know what Hawthorn's plan was. It didn't seem like there was much of a plan at all. Like, look, I've seen times when teams struggle to, get the ball out of their own 50 because of pressure, but it's not like there were so much being pressured there. Melbourne were more sitting back, and it's just, even if they were being pressured, most of the kicks from the Hawthorn defense was like, what is this supposed to accomplish? It's like it wasn't opening anything up for anybody. They were just kind of
Biding their time and looking to punish something that never came up.
it just looked like they were stalling, honestly.
So, you think I'm stalling?
I think there was potential there at times for Hawthorn from the center bounces because they got hands on a lot of them, but just weren't clean enough at the bounces. The Demons had the better of the contest just from being able to pick things up cleanly. Jack Viney with 15 contested possessions and 7 clearances. Really the story there in the middle. And obviously Clayton Oliver and Christian Petraga opening things up as well. Now, this was an interesting game for the Demons because they lost those 2 All-Australian defenders. Stephen May in a huge collision with Mabior Chol, cracked ribs, and I think like a vertebral injury as well, but seems like it's more pain management with no surgery required. And the thought is he could even be in for the
Gather round.
which is unbelievable in and of itself. And Lever could play this week because of like soreness around the kneecap, below the kneecap, I think. Wow. Okay. And, the other defenders who came in there, they were able to make up for things reasonably well. Marty Hoare came in as the sub and fit into things well. The ratings didn't show it, but I think it just kind of kept the stability there. And then you obviously have players who were able to slide back, like Harrison Petty, who very much did that this game, and Christian Saylor, who was cast in more of a defensive role from the beginning. You had the Lions talking about positional versatility from the start of the year, but it's the Demons who I think have more of that. So good on them for that. In terms of a player, though, who I don't think gets nearly enough attention for his good work because there's so many others around him with bigger names, I just want to give props before we kind of move on here to Alex Neil-Bowen, because he was on the ball and making the right decisions from the very start of the game.
He was good. He was kind of making stuff happen off broken plays, off the ground, providing like that second dynamic element in addition to Kazi.
Yeah, and whereas Kazi can do more in the air, he like totally mossed Massimo Zambrosio at one point in this game. Neil-Bowen is just a very steady player at ground level, at half forward, sometimes helping in center bounces, sometimes rushing in from the forward 50 to be that extra number there and putting on good delivery all over the ground as well. Just a steady provider who I know that some Demons fans credit to be like their barometer. He's the type of player that just often gets overlooked because he doesn't have the flash. He's just a very consistent performer who is not, a round low vote getter. So just want to give the credit to Neil-Bowen here before we close things on what, aside from injuries, was just kind of a blah game. I am not looking forward to Hawthorn coming off of that. Their kicking at goal has not been good, and I hope that continues. They'll probably start the game like 12-4 because that's how these things work. But I hope they turn in another turn before getting it together, and I don't expect they will. They'll be up for Easter Monday. Hey, going back to that Saints game, no, I was reminded, that game had a break at halftime, and we're going to take a break at halftime of this episode. One last thing before that, though. Funniest play of the day to me on all of Saturday, maybe throughout the week. You had Ben Brown going back for a set shot. You know how this works. Just a super, super long run up. You can play Chariots of Fire.
Oh, this was really fun.
Yeah, you can,
I know what you're talking about. I know where this is going.
you can play Chariots of Fire in the background, as you said, and he passes it off to Cade Chandler. That was brilliant, and Chandler did score off it. And I just would love to have seen more just like the shit-eating grin that Ben Brown had in that moment. That was awesome. More of that, please, Ben.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
As we get back into things here, and before Ethan needs to make another point about the Saints from Spud's game, I want to remind you all that we are on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Americans Footy. That's where you'll get all of our footy takes during the week, along with other random thoughts, including maybe something about Australians in the NCAA tournament. On relevant social media, I am at BenjaminHK01. Ethan is at Castle Media.
Brian Harambe is on Instagram at cat named Brian. He's currently lying here sleeping right next to me.
Yeah, like all spread out, which is the more fun way to have a cat sleeping next to you. I mean, when they're curled up, it's like a nice weight on you, especially if it's at your feet. But nah, right next to you like that, that's always good. Because there's always potential for them to knead on you as well. Like when a cat starts kneading on you, she's like, what is this? Oh, wait, this is amazing. Aw. Any last comments about the Saints?
Collingwood 0-3.
Collingwood are 0-3. And now it is time for Holy Thursday.
It's also time to discuss the remainder of round 2. So, Sydney, 1917, 131, defeats Essendon, 15-11, 101.
Oh, wait, I do have something else about Melbourne versus Hawthorn. That's scoregami.
Was that Andrew Gigat?
Andrew Gigat's mentioned it. Yeah, 93-38 had never happened before in the AFL. But yeah, Sydney and Essendon, Glicko called it. Thanks to Jake Stringer's after the siren goal, Sydney by 30. Rory is back.
Like he ever left?
He ever left. Are we going for like the whole glorious thing here?
No, I was just...
Done that start like, you know I'm back. Like I never left. I never left. Not Macklemore's best. Sydney increased their scoring each quarter?
Incrementally. It wasn't like it was a massive leap.
Yeah, and weathered an early injury with Harry Cunningham get concussed as Peter Wright crashed into him. He was sent straight to the tribunal, and the AFL looks like they're going to be asking for 4 games, if not more. So I expect a suspension for this. I suspect this to stand, whatever it is, because Wright did brace for the collision and turn his shoulder. And when it comes to the new rules that came in place in the aftermath of Braden Maynard's smother attempt, regardless of whether or not it's a football action, you have to have that sort of care as you're making the collision. So I think this is going to come down pretty harshly here.
I think this is going to be a pretty high-profile trial.
Well, we'll see how these rules are actually enforced. I expect that it will be 4. So in came Corey Warner and just kind of fit in with things in the middle. I mean, Cunningham can be an important kind of one-on-one defender, but they made up in the aggregate, I think. So they weathered that pretty well.
You could say Sydney pulled away, late third, and then
Essendon kind of fought into things again in the fourth quarter, which caused Alistair Nicholson to say, the Bombers are coming hard, very hard. Add that to the Footy After Dark count there. We have to, I guess, like feature like a Footy After Dark segment on America's Brownlow.
Yeah, you're going to have to... I'm sure getting those clips may take you a while, so you might want to like get a head start on that.
Yeah, well, I know ways to like capture stuff, but yeah, I
know, but just like going back and finding them within games.
Yeah, I should probably do that kind of as we find them there. So happy we got that moment. Very back and forth first half, and then the Swans did end up pulling away in the third quarter. You got Errol Golden doing so much of this game, starting a lot of movement in the back half, then affecting things again as he ran on, a lot of overlaps, and then already being at full speed when they tried to move and successfully did move to the outside. This was one of those games where it's just like, oh yeah, this guy's a Brownlow candidate. It's kind of a reminder of just how many Brownlow capable players the Swans have. I mean, the two thus far, clearly Heaney and Golden. Yeah, but like Florent hasn't been that crazy so far this year. Chad Warner's been good. Luke Parker hasn't played. Callum Mills hasn't played. I would only call Warner, Heaney, and Golden actual Brownlow contenders at the end of the day. The others would be like guys that you could easily see taking votes off. And both Chad and Corey, whereas they didn't make like perennial award-winning animation, because you have to make a terrible Warner Brothers pun at some point, they did have their typical running roles there. I saw Corey just be so frustrated with not being able to finish like his brother a few times, but Sydney was just much more fluid in terms of generating a lot of center clearances in the second half. I think they had 6 of the first 7 to start the third quarter, and a lot of success came from there. Also, as is typical with Essendon, they couldn't keep up with fast transitions and rebounds. That was why Golden was so impactful in this game. Essendon's defense, despite having Laverde and Mackay in there, just can't keep up in terms of just the actual on-ball speed that some teams can have. You know, if they have time to set up, they're decent enough kicks that they can make things happen. A lot still can flow through Andrew McGrath and Nick Martin if he pushes back. Martin did kind of his normal work between halfback and half forward in this game. Liked what he did, but Essendon isn't afforded that sort of setup time, especially against a team with all sorts of young, strong runners like the Swans have. So I felt that this was kind of inevitable for the game to turn in Sydney's favor, and they weathered a bit of a comeback attempt in the fourth quarter as well. I want to mention unsung hero for the Swans, whose only real mention to this point had been that he was the Rising Star nominee in a round where a little bit over half the league didn't play. And it shouldn't have even been him. It should have been Blake Howes of Melbourne. Yeah, Matt Roberts, though, he's been playing really well. I like his work, just kind of in sequences, usually around the edge of the defensive 50, but he's been fluid in handballs. He just looks like he's very integrated into everything right now. It's very much what Braden Campbell has been able to do at halfback as well. And I think that's part of why Campbell's been allowed to go forward, is that Roberts has made this switch to the back, and John Longmire very fittingly heaped praise on him, on Roberts that is, in his post-game presser, because this is a more recent move to the back, and it's really worked for him. He has been able to start a lot of those sequences, feeding out to someone like Golden, and then just kind of everything flowing smoothly from there, because again, it's Errol Golden. A couple of his goals were later, but Tom Papley 4-1 off 24 disposals. And Justin McInerney continues to play really well. 22 disposals and 11 score involvements. Yeah, so McInerney more on the inside, starting those scoring passages. When they wanted to work on the outside, Roberts would be one of those starting points there, doing stuff that maybe Mills would do otherwise. So Roberts making the most of his opportunities there. What Essendon managed to do well at the start of the game, tell me what they did.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Is that they actually stopped Brody Grundy from getting as many touches right away. Sam Draper matched up against him pretty well. Essendon with 11 of the first 14 clearances, but Grundy found the way to get into the game in other ways with some of the follow-up work and some tackling as well. And as the game wore on, Essendon saw that, one, Todd Goldstein was the more active of the two rucks, and two, they needed some more speed and small capability, so Draper did end up getting subbed off for Alwyn Davey Jr. Some of that might have also just been a management thing. I think it's that too, but it just kind of all came together as like a very logical, tactical decision. Now, Davey was a late in as the sub because Jake Kelly was out with illness ahead of what would have been his 150th game. And I believe that is also why Essendon did not have a banner, because once it gets to 100, you usually see like every 50 or so be highlighted on the banner. So I expected it would have said like, congratulations, Jake Kelly, 150 games. Now, it would be silly to have that if he's not even playing. Although, if any club were to make a mistake like that, I feel like Essendon would be the one. The one thing so far that I don't love about how the Swans have played, it doesn't quite give off the look of a Premiership defense. Again, no Mills there, definitely playing a role in that. Lewis Melkin is really finding his form again, and Robbie Fox has gone forward at times to be that extra, that annoyance. So this team is still not at full strength, and that's the scary thing about it to me. I mean, my thing is that their midfield and forward success has allowed them to not have to worry as much defensively. But, when they face some of the more dangerous forward attacks, I think it's going to be pretty scary. But, they were able to withstand Melbourne. They held Melbourne to 64. So maybe this is the way around it. Like you look at the list, though, it doesn't quite look like a Premiership defense. It looks like a really good everything else. Maybe they have enough strength elsewhere that the defense just has to be good enough.
Are we going off like a defense wins championships thing here? Or is it more like 2 out of 3 50s have to be stellar, the other has to keep up? Because that's kind of what you were talking about with Geelong.
No, it's less the defense wins championships and just like there is a clear difference between a good defense and a Premiership defense.
There's a clear difference between what Sydney has and what their crosstown rivals have?
Yeah. I'm just looking at teams that have won flags in the last few years, and they pretty much all have seemed to have that defensively. So,
prove us wrong, Swans. Prove Ethan wrong in particular.
Before we go on, I don't have something about the Saints game, but I had something I had forgotten to mention about Hawthorn. Who we've hardly talked about so far that hasn't had a great start to the year is one of my favorite players, Jai Newcomb.
I mentioned him briefly.
To press the panic button there.
No, and again, this is not the year where we expected Hawthorn to make the push, but they were really fumbly in the middle and couldn't get a lot of center clearance success because of that. So there's stuff for them to clear up there. I think Connor Nash was probably the best of those midfielders, and he wasn't even that stellar. So definitely a watch there as to when they'll find their form and if they can take advantage of a younger crop in the middle this coming Monday with somebody like Jai Clark there, probably getting some important minutes against those bigger bodies for Hawthorn. I would also like to see them kind of stack up on the bigger side by putting someone like Henry Hustwaite on ball as well.
I mentioned this in part because our polished turd vote was not a midfielder. It was Josh Webb. And don't forget, that is something that we are going to give regular updates about publicly, whereas with America's Brownlow, we're keeping the votes quiet. In fact, we're even hiding them on the spreadsheet so we can't check on them, so we don't know or have any way of influencing, like, well, this guy is doing really well, so we think he should get more votes or fewer votes. So we're really just going into each game blind on that.
Yeah, it's not like a case where we don't know what to do here. Fuck it, Brisbane L. Neal, 3 votes. Going on to Sunday now. So Ethan watched a lot more of this live than I did because I was very busy with some synagogue events with,
or as I call it, God stuff.
But yeah, the Jewish holiday of Purim just happened, and I was very active in organizing like a Purim spiel, a play that our religious school students put on, and just a lot of supervision of those kids needed last night, and then I taught them again today. So
what was the theme? Because there's always a theme.
Well, there were 2 spiels. Ours was just like a very like Seussian thing with like all the Dr. Seuss rhymes and the costumes and stuff. The adults in the synagogue, including the rabbi, put on more of an ABBA themed thing with like altered lyrics to ABBA standards, and that was entertaining. But
so what was the one the kids did then? Was that
that was the Dr. Seuss one? Yeah, and I ended up like editing a lot of that script and fleshing it out a bit more because there were some plot holes there.
But Sunday, yeah, I was kind of the big man in charge.
Well, I took a lot of Saturday because Ethan and Dad were at the women's basketball tournament. So it ended up evening out, and we went back and watched the other games as well. But Ethan will definitely have more to say about a couple of these games.
Yeah, so I watched these live, whereas you watched more of Saturday's games live. But I do have one report from those games. Women be shopping for bids to the Final Four.
Come on. Western Bulldogs 18-7, 115, defeating Gold Coast 10-7-67. A stellar kicking day considering the wind factor at a smaller stadium like Mars Stadium there, and just really just a light breeze in most cases, and was in this case.
Yeah, I mean, definitely affected things more to the left of screen, so where the Bulldogs were kicking in the first and third quarter.
Now seemed to have much of an effect.
I mean, much of an ill effect anyway, yeah. And we thought the crowd was bigger. It was just loud. I'm surprised that it was still under 10,000, but they brought the energy for this one.
Yeah, it looked really good.
You know who else looked really good? The AFL's Mr. Pectacular, Cody Waitman, with 4 goals in the first and 6 overall. Just, they were feeding him a lot. The Tulls were occupying more of the bigger bodies there, and Waitman ended up taking a hanger as well, just being in the right place.
This sort of game is why I normally find the Bulldogs so frustrating. They should be able to do this way more often, and instead they have games with like incomprehensible lineup decisions like Caleb Daniel as the sub, and they still had bad lineup decisions in this game. They kept Jack McRae down on the twos, and he had 26 disposals by halftime, and what was it, like 47 for the game or something?
Yeah, 47 total, but of course, having won this game, watch him not play still.
Yeah, I think he actually does get in, especially after a couple of injuries, but...
Oh yeah, Nick Caulfield got hurt because he's Nick Caulfield.
Yeah, like in the first few minutes. But Cody Waitman was good. Bontempelli and Liberatore outdid Rowell, Miller, and Anderson.
Well, Libba, as we expected, as I called particular, because you asked the question in the preview, I think, Libba did have the neutralizing job on Rowell, and that kept things open for the rest of them. Bontempelli and Trelawney with some follow-up as well, but kind of that cast was its typical self. You and I both really actually appreciated some of the lesser expected things in terms of the Bulldogs lineup and positioning decisions. We saw them move the Tulls around as they should throughout the game, going with the hotter hands.
Yeah, it's like you've got all these Tulls. You don't have to be so rigid in their structure. And one of the ways they did that was Aaron Naughton kind of playing all over the ground, usually on the outside. I really liked how he was able to interfere with balls in the air. I liked the way he was able to play off the ground. I liked everything he did. I don't think his numbers were anything special, but I really liked how he played in this.
Like, functionally, Naughton was very important in this game, and that allowed some of the flexibility with Sam Darcy as well.
He kind of played a ruck forward role, 2 goals, 15 disposals, 12 hitouts.
And some important jobs there in the back as well, taking some over there. And I think the Bulldogs moving around the Tulls a lot forced the Suns to do some lesser expected things, like moving Jack Lukosius back to defense. Remember, Lukosius had, I think it was, 17 goals in his first 4 seasons, then 39 last year to be one behind Ben King for the club lead. But with Charlie Ballard having more of a one-on-one job against Darcy when he swung forward, it meant that Lukosius had to occupy more of a defensive job, and Jamari Ugle-Hagan still beat him there. So there are things still to work out in terms of defense for the Suns. I would say give time to Mac Andrew, because Mac Andrew.
The Suns also had some weird stuff structurally, like Ben Long playing forward. They haven't really found a spot for Levi Casbolt to really impact the game yet, which has got to be frustrating because, I mean, that dude can just injure people by taking a mark without trying to hurt anybody.
And he isn't even the third biggest guy on the over for them in the game, because the commentators were obsessing over how big Jed Walter is. And yeah, I mean, he's a pretty big dude for an 18-year-old. 197 centimeters, 97 kilos.
How many stones does he weigh?
I forget how. I'll figure that out.
What is his height in cubits?
Oh, yeah, right. We're cubit guys. We talked about that in season 2. I forget. But that was his measurement last year anyway. So,
yeah, because now we're not allowed to know how much they weigh.
Going into last year, though, he was like 6'5.5", 214 pounds, which, yeah, is big for an 18-year-old. However, nobody is talking about how big Ned Moyle is. Game 3, first AFL goal. Did Tim English get the better of him? Yes, but unsurprisingly. But whenever you see him on the field, it's just like, damn, that's a gigantic human being. 206 centimeters, 104 kilos as he was measured last year.
Or in non-communist measurements, 6'9", 229 pounds. I'm surprised he's not a former basketballer.
You would expect him to be running the 5 at state level or something.
Can you imagine him going up against like DJ Burns?
Oh my gosh, the gigantic dude from North Carolina State.
We were so close to him matching up against Lampkin. Colorado had to go and lose. It was so close.
I like how like even Australians tune into the NCAA tournament just because everybody knows how big it is, and even when St. Mary's is not playing, that's a fun thing there.
But yeah, like Ben Long at forward was weird. Back to the Dogs rotating defenders around and stuff and using guys in different spots. Buku Thomas did good work in both 50s.
Birthday goal for the 24-year-old, our friend of a friend of the show. But I just like, they played up to their talent, and it's like, why doesn't this happen more? I was so happy when I saw Buku's goal. I wish I'd seen it live because I'd probably have been like running around the house celebrating. He hadn't had a goal since winter of 2022 at the AFL level, despite kicking, I think, 41 in the VFL. He's been played more as a back at the top level. Again, they have the ability to keep moving these talls around and going with whatever works there. Yeah, have Buku take some forward contests. Move on to center half back if his accuracy isn't there for a game. Let Sam Darcy do whatever the fuck he pleases because he's good at it.
Maybe use Sam Darcy in kind of a Luke Jackson-ish role.
Kind of Max Gone-ish there where he can like slide back as that extra out of the ruck.
Yeah, now there are going to be some lineup changes for them in the coming week.
Well, English can obviously do that as well. English is just a sound midfielder who happened to have a huge growth spurt as a late teen.
So here's the thing in the next week for them. So they'll go up against, well, it's the Eagles. But Oscar Baker came in as the sub, kicked 3 goals, had a really nice game. Then you lost Ed Richards to a concussion where he just kind of ran into David Swallow's shoulder.
That's kind of a reflection of the chaotic game that Richards had in the second half, because in the first, he was cutting off a lot, one of their more prominent defenders there.
I thought he was one of the best players in the entire game.
I was going to say, like, had him overcome us in terms of defensive impact in the first half, and then just turnover prone out of the break and crashed himself out of next week's game.
And then Latham Vandermeer might be hurt too. He got hurt trying to tackle Nick Holman, that's an understandable way to get hurt. But you would think, first off, Jack McRae gets back in. Second, Baker made a case to elevate himself, or maybe they keep him in the sub role. I think Rory Lobb had 4 goals in the VFL, so how do you work him in? It's weird. Also, second half, when the Suns tried to make things interesting, Liam Jones just intercepted like everything. He had 4 or 5 intercept marks in the third quarter of his 7 for the game. It was just like during different stretches, all sorts of different pieces of this team showed off why on paper this team should be so good. And then the consistent parts throughout were Bontempelli, Liberatore, Adam Treloar, who I thought was really solid. And who's proven me wrong through the Dogs' first couple games is Lockie Bramble, who's just done a good job moving the ball out of the back. Seems to be the right role for him, and they never really got him into much of a role at all in Hawthorn. Commentators seem to think the Suns wore down second half. They get a break this week before playing the Giants in the
Adelaide Hills, like a tiny crowd for what people were hyping up before this as a top of the table clash. I want to see I don't want to see a stadium crush, but I want to see like so many people trying to get into this game just to see the Giants in particular.
So here's my thing. The Suns, no cause for alarm. They're 2-1. They're in a good spot. Just try to figure out what you can do with Levi Casbolt, because I think he's underutilized. And defensively, they weren't very good outside of, I guess, Sam Collins. He was kind of the victim of a Waitman hanger, but that wasn't really his responsibility. Yeah, Charlie Ballard had pretty bad turnover at one point. I still think Caleb Graham should be in there. I'm always convinced of that, and hopefully they get Mac Andrew in.
What I'm going to say once more regarding the Suns in terms of the forwards is let Levi do more in terms of the forward 50, and let Ben King run a bit more, especially with Walter in the mix now. I still remember from early on his career, before he did his ACL, King having that running job, even from the center square to half forward, putting on good deliveries into the forward 50. Yes, he's your leading goal kicker, but just kind of break things up at times and let Ben have some more run.
Didn't Max King get some work outside 50 this week in the Saints game?
Yeah, and it was just like a role reversal from what we'd come to know from the Twins. Richmond, 13-14-92, defeated by Port Adelaide, 18-14-122. Richmond with a strong second quarter to take an 11-point halftime lead. Then Port scored 7 goals to 4. Narrow lead into three-quarter time that they worked out from there, just with more midfield dominance, despite not winning the ruck battle, definitely with Toby Nankervis getting the better of his former teammate Yvonne Soldo, despite some conduct that resulted in a fine. This really ended up being a midfield victory for Port, with the combination of Zach Butters, Connor Rosie, and Willem Drew. No Horn Francis, no matter. Drew had a neutralizing job on Toronto and was plenty involved otherwise as well. A rare goal for him, not much of a goal scorer. I want to talk about the end of the third and start of the fourth. So it wasn't, just like a simple 7-4 third quarter. It had been 7-2, and then Liam Baker struck twice very quickly right before three-quarter time. And then start of the fourth, Willem Drew got a bunch of clearances that turned into goals, and all of a sudden, Port opened up a 31-point lead. I do want to mention, in that stretch, there was a Jackson Mead snap that definitely hit Jaden Short's fingertips, and yet they didn't even review it, even though the common theme of this round was reviewing stuff that definitely didn't need to be reviewed. Yet we don't look at that one, which, on replay, you can see he had 3 fingers on each hand bent back from touching the ball. Oh, no, he just wiggled them. It would be cool if guys somehow, during some other attempts, just start instinctively moving their fingers back. You would have to be so precise with those little movements. It's almost impossible, but it would be cool. It's like moving the fingers back like a reverse "don't mind if I do." But yeah, Brew had a good game, and then further back, Kane Farrell moved things really well. I thought Connor Rosie's first half was nice. First quarter was tremendous, but throughout the game, Zach Butters was great, and I was surprised that AFL Daily didn't include him in their top 5 for the round. I thought he was tremendous. I thought he was the best midfielder out of all 16 teams that played this week. Oh yeah, 16. That still feels weird to say. We'll get to do it again this week. I don't think there was any big revelation from either team in this game. The performance that you expected did definitely show up. I think maybe Farrell doesn't get as much of the spotlight because Houston is the one with kind of the more flash and great timing in terms of clutch moments. He obviously had that after the siren goal last year. But Farrell is one of the best and longest straight kicks in the competition and really displayed that ability in starting off some sequences from the back in this contest in more of an outside role than Houston, because Houston really likes that movement, just sprinting into the corner and then uncorking from there. So when Port goes to the outside, watch more for Farrell's involvement there, and as he works more into a wing spot, definitely watch more for Jace Burgoyne, who got into the game much more in the second half. My sleeper for this year, now wearing his father Peter's number 7. Yeah, quietly really impacted the game in the third quarter after being non-existent in the first half. When I was watching this game, had it not been for Lockie Jones doing his calf, I thought, oh man, Burgoyne's the type to get kind of a "you suck" sub before he found his role in the chain of the third. Richmond, Shea Bolton's second quarter was incredible. Would we call it best quarter on ground for any player, or would you still say Rosie's first? Maybe best quarter on ground for any player this round, and that includes Wakeman's 4-goal quarter. Whoa. When we were talking about the polished turd for this game, we had a debate between Bolton and Baker because both vanished for a quarter in the second half, and you could argue that Baker had some more consistency, but it was more that Baker just had those 2 goals right at the end of the third. Yeah, whereas Bolton, it was the entire second quarter that he was in charge. Yeah, so we did end up giving the 1 vote to Bolton there. We have yet to have anybody register multiple polished turd votes. It'll happen at some point. I feel like the winner will end up with, somewhere between 6 and 10. But that seems like a lot. What happens if we have a tie? Is this a case where we would have to resolve a tie, or is it like the Brownlow in real life where we just have a winner's tie? Although maybe a tiebreaker would favor the one whose team lost fewer games because they had fewer chances to earn points. I like that way. All right. So other Richmond observations in this game. I thought Ben Miller, for the most part, did a good job on Charlie Dixon. Dixon kind of wore him down and got a couple late, but for the most part, he did a good job on him. Our question going into this game was just, how is Richmond's back group going to be able to keep up with Port's tall contingent? And Miller had kind of a welcome back game for himself. Tom Marshall still did get 4 goals, finding his touch again, and Jeremy Finlayson 3-1, but Miller kept Dixon out of things, and
I think that's a credit to Ben in that case.
It's Ben.
Look, that's one of the toughest one-on-one matchups out there against a healthy Charlie Dixon. Absolutely. I know where you're going from here. Well, Richmond had a couple of players in this game that I legitimately did not notice, and you could have told me they weren't in the lineup, and I would not have, it wouldn't have changed my opinion one bit. Well, it was Sam Banks who was subbed off. Yes, and I did not know he was in this game. Truthfully. Unfortunately, didn't notice Mikel Lafau a ton, but he gets a pass considering he was elevated from sub to being in the full 22, the start of the game. Morris Rioli Jr. even ran out with the team before being deemed out with back soreness. By the way, love that Lafau's family gave him a haka in celebration of his debut. He passed up a goal in the first quarter just because Ryan Mansell was coming in and had a lot of speed. It was he's done this before. But Lafau will get another opportunity. It was his first AFL game after just joining the list, I think 33 days prior, getting that SSP spot. So there will be more chances for him. Glad he got an opportunity so soon. But yeah, legit did not know Sam Banks was playing in this game. Tom Brown noticed maybe 2 or 3 times. But the one who I did unfortunately notice for all the wrong reasons was Dylan Grimes, who there's been a lot said about Steel side bottom looking finished. Man, Dylan Grimes looks really finished. And it's not like he's going to be taken out of the game for any non-injury reason because he's still considered a leader in the back. But remind me whose assignment was in this game? Was it kind of Marshall?
Yeah, kind of Marshall. It did not go well. He also, he had a turnover that led to a goal when Travis Boak tackled him. Oh yeah, it was Boak's 350th.
An actual good chairing off reason there.
Yeah, Marshall lost his first battle with Grimes and then just kind of schooled him the rest of the game.
Old man.
Nick Lawstone was just okay. They need him to be transformative in the back, and he was just okay.
Especially if Grimes is washed like this, worst on ground territory.
I know you like Jack Ross's game. I thought Baker was good, Bolton was good, Jaden Short was solid. I liked what Daniel Rioli did. That ability to slingshot forward that we've talked about so many times. Taranto was decent.
Willem Drew got him enough, though, in terms of the center contest, that was why I just liked Drew's game even more.
Still just disappointing his goal didn't come with another holy fuck. And what else? Just disappointing when this game only draws 30,000, but Richmond's not a great team right now, and you had probably 450,000 at Formula One a couple miles away, so those things add up.
And it's not like this matchup draws huge crowds. I think it might have gotten into the 40s last year when it wasn't conflicting with the Grand Prix, so there's that.
Ooh, Grand Prix.
Well, ooh la dee da, Mr. Frenchman.
What do you call it? A race. West Coast Eagles, 5-13-43, defeated by the Greater Western Sydney Giants, 16-12-108. The Giants pick up their first win over the Eagles at Optus Stadium, and that was actually mentioned on the broadcast. So good job there, Adam Papalia.
All right, well, that does it for this round. It's awards time, so Mark of the Week. Okay, I'll actually say a couple things.
I will as well. Firstly, the Giants debuting a new uniform. Instead of having a charcoal G in numbers, it was all white. And I guess that might work maybe more in terms of actual evening contest, but
it was very bright.
It was very
the white numbers, they were very bright.
It was very noticeable. I would have appreciated an outline on it or something. We knew that Tom Green would dominate from the center. That's just kind of natural. Tim Kelly could only do so much on his own, and Green compiled 34 disposals, 21 contested, 11 inside 50s, 8 clearances, and 767 meters. I captained him once again. That was a very easy call. Kelly was the one potential saving grace in the middle for West Coast, and even that just didn't work. Had to do a lot of kind of mop-up defensive work. It did decently there, but was swimming against the tide for the entire game and was very much a lost cause there. And who had a pulse for the Eagles? Well, Kelly. Elliot Yeo stayed healthy again. Miracles do happen even if they're smothered in a gigantic pile of shit. Jake Waterman's still decent at forward. Jeremy McGovern, where would this team be without you? And Jaden Hunt with some of that slingshotting job getting forward at the end and scoring the goal, but otherwise just
nothing really to report from the Eagles. I mean, Brady Hoff did stay on Toby Green and did limit him. He had an easy goal in the beginning, but that was pretty much all that we heard from Toby Green. So credit to Hoff for keeping him largely out of the action as he's been able to do on Charlie Cameron before. So you know what? I'll take that. There's not a lot of positives that are going to come out of this game. You get time into Harley Reid, you see what else is there, and you kind of wait things out. I'm already at the point where I am counting down the number of quarters left for the West Coast Eagles this season. 84.
It's not great when the best thing you can say is that, well, they didn't mail it in the fourth quarter.
Well, admittedly, they did keep the pressure on there, and it is just disappointing that they could not finish well in the fourth and only kicked 3-6. Throughout the game, just a lot of opportunities went wanting. As for the Giants, I don't think there was anything, crazy except for stat lines. Actually, I'll mention one thing. Harvey Thomas kept up with 2 more assists. So he has had 3, 1, and 2 assists to start his career. Ryan Myers, watch out. He also got a first goal that I don't even think he was expecting.
Yeah, he just kind of more or less stepped on top of the ball as it crossed the line.
You know what? He got it, and
it doesn't matter, had sex.
Doesn't matter, scored in the AFL. And yeah, Nick Haynes had sex, right.
Kieran Briggs was completely dominant. Harry Barnett really couldn't stack up, and Bailey Williams didn't fare much better. One of the more dominant games I've seen from a ruckman, not just this year, but anywhere. And Lockie Whitfield was kind of the leader of the tsunami. Not much else to say. Quick question for you, though. Did Harvey Thomas win the Rising Star Award for the week?
You're going to ask that because no, he didn't.
Who did?
It better not be Jed Walter just because he's big.
It's not. It is someone who has been nominated before.
So clearly he didn't get enough games last year.
Yes.
That being?
George Wardlaw.
Okay, I can see that. A lot of work.
It should be Thomas, though.
I can understand why, but yes, I think Thomas has fully deserved it at this point, and I hope he can get it with another good performance in the against the Suns.
Who was Sam Taylor on? Because his one-on-one defending got a lot of praise, but who was he? I mean, without Oscar Allen, who was he really on?
I mean, Bailey J at times, Jake Waterman there.
I like Waterman. I think he's not the most exciting player. He's not like a Liam Ryan, but he plays with a motor that, like, even on a struggling team, well, struggling's probably way too nice of a way of saying it, but he makes shit happen in a positive way.
On a team that might not even fare well in the USAFL. The Austin Crows would beat the West Coast Eagles.
Probably not, but Jake Waterman looks like he's bought in, and whether it's scoring or creating chances for other guys, he makes things happen, and just he would be one guy that you could go stick on a contending team right now, and it would be like, yeah, he fits here.
I think it actually is time for awards now. So I do want to kind of recap where the winners have been for the first couple rounds, because I'm not sure if we really went over them. So for Mark of the Week, Joe Danaher got the nod for the opening round with his hanger on Lewis Young at the goal square.
I think that's the best one so far this year.
I think so as well, especially being in the goal square gets that attention, and came after a good mark in that sequence as well from Lincoln McCarthy. Round 1, it did go to Josh Weddle with his knee to the back of Archie Perkins' head. Your nominees for round 2, Luke Jackson took an intercept mark on the line over his own debutante teammate, Josh Draper. So welcome to the AFL, Josh. You don't usually see your own teammate giving you that welcome moment. Then you had Bailey Fritsch over James Sicily. That was really kind of a second effort mark there, where
he clearly came up with it. It's not like it was a, did he really mark that?
No, he definitely did.
No, he's not like that's an NFL catch.
Yeah, he secured it. And Cody Waitman took one over Sam Collins as part of his mammoth first quarter. I have a hard time deciding between Jackson and Fritsch here, but I know that you've made your case for Fritsch.
All three are solid. Not going to be bothered by any of them winning, but yeah, I'm going to go with Fritsch. I mentioned, it was a catch in the NFL. This Eagles game reminded me that the AFL needs to take after the NFL and make like the final game of the week, like a Sunday night game. Like, let's have a proper Sunday night game instead of that. I mean, look, when Freer's at home, it's not as bad, but still, a lot of times it's either going to be an Eagles game or a crappy Marvel game. So,
well, in the We got Hawthorne and Collingwood, which really should.
Well, Hawthorne did beat them last year, but
Is it round 8? Yes, it's round 8 where we got the Sunday night Q clash.
see, that is proper.
Yes. And then we've also got the Essendon and Carlton Kings Eve game again in round 13. So a couple actual big Sunday nighters there, but more of that, yes.
All right, goal of the week. Winners so far, Jacob Van Rooyen in the opening round with the one that he kind of dropped that turned into a falcon, into an accidental bicycle. Round 1 was Jeremy Cameron, who had the 1-2 with Brad Close and then kicked from a sharp angle from the left pocket. I think that was late in the first quarter. Your nominees for this round, you've got Isaac Rankin in the final seconds, receiving on the run from Lockie Murphy and kicking from the right boundary.
No, JB, that was not a big goal.
No, it was a cool-looking goal. It was an impressive one, but, I mean, well, maybe he knows something. Maybe he knows that the Crows are going to make the finals barely off of percentage because of that goal.
I can see into the future.
It is just funny because, you know, they missed so many easy shots, and then he hit stat at the end of the game. Matthias Filippo across the body from 50. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be a shot at goal or if Liam Henry was supposed to mark it in the goal square, but it worked out. That was also where Henry got hurt, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
He was getting tied up in the goal square by, I want to say, Isaac Quainer. And then Jack Higgins, the right snap from either on or over the boundary, depending on your perspective.
If you are not a Collingwood fan, it was in bounds. So it was in bounds, and you should spam the votes for it.
I will vote for that one just because that, although the Rankin one was a really nice goal, and I appreciated.
At this point, Higgins is your goal of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the Cameron one and round 1 was really nice too, but we haven't had anything like, you know, up to the level of like the Ashcroft goal from last year or the Charlie Cameron deflection or anything. We'll get those, but
we ought to. But
I appreciated the Rankin goal because it was nice to see a cool goal against Geelong that didn't actually impact anything.
Like how you were totally okay in the 22 grand final with Tom Papley getting a late goal because he couldn't celebrate it.
Exactly.
Main characters thus far, opening round was Brodie Grundy, who outdid Max Gawn despite having been stung by a man-of-war jellyfish earlier in the day, and then like totally bought into the bid on Roman Bryan. By the way, a Freo fan said that Brodie Grundy looks like Mick Fleetwood, especially on the cover of Rumours, and now I cannot unsee it. He also looks like he's a mixologist.
I'll have a whiskey sour.
Coke coming right up.
Or like a dry goods clerk on the Oregon Trail who just gets you as much pemmican as you need. Round 1, it was Brian Myers because he yeeted Rowan Marshall's shoe. This round, I don't know how I didn't talk about it yet, but it's as good a time as any. The Oval Invader during the Crows-Cats game because, like, firstly, how was he even able to get onto the field that far where he was actually able to contact players? I think he might have actually
literally had the ball.
He made contact, I think, with Jake Saligo and Brody Smith. Does the security not face the crowd? Like, how did that happen so easily? But Ben Keys helped bring him down. The security finally got him, and the right call was made. Holding the ball, says the umpire wearing number 5 in hoops.
Which is funny because the Cats couldn't get a holding the ball call all game. I think they only had like 9 frees for the entire game or something insane.
Probably just like more cathartic for Cameron in that mode, just like, hey, I can actually call this one ball.
But yeah, I don't like to glorify idiots on the field, but this ended up being a pretty iconic moment, and good job Ben Keys for tackling him. And Matt Crouch had got the hand on him first, and then Keys really got him down. And I'm just always in favor of that. I'm in favor of, like, you know, there was the one at Levi's a couple years ago that Bobby Wagner laid out.
When the Seahawks were playing the Niners here.
No, it was the Rams. It was with the Rams. No, sorry. But, yeah, I am always in favor of just laying them the fuck out. So, like, there's still a tackle I think about, but I think, like, what's the greatest tackle of all time? It was a friendly played in Charlotte, North Carolina as a World Cup tune-up between Mexico and Iceland, I think for the 2010 World Cup.
How do you remember this shit?
Because it was like the best tackle ever. Like, I think you could see like the guy's teeth flying out of his mouth.
Was this like a Mexico player or an Iceland player that made the tackle or what?
It was just a security guy.
You need to find this clip for me.
I will.
But we're going to close out this episode, another long one, because just a lot of in-game analysis.
I do want to mention really quick.
Okay, what did you miss from the Saints game?
No, not from the Saints game, just that it's come out while we've been recording that Patrick Dangerfield had scans on his hamstring and is going to miss the next 2 weeks.
More concerned about missing him for the Bulldogs game, but, being 2-0, it's a lot easier to focus on getting guys healthy instead of having everyone right in there, and hopefully Brune, Atkins, and Duncan will all be back this week.
Happy 0th birthday to PJ.
We're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, Americans Footy. We should probably start a Patreon just in case people want to pay us.
I mean, you could support us through Spotify as well. There's the link on that. I am on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
I'm on Twitter at Castle Media. Brian Harambe is sleeping next to me. He's on Instagram at cat named Brian. And we'll talk to you again in a couple nights.